So first of all, welcome to St George's and to Open Spaces. This event, as many of you know, is the last in a year-long series of online events offered through our extracurricular programme, Open Spaces, which brings science, medicine and healthcare into dialogue with the arts, humanities and enterprise. And I would like to say thank you to all of those who've been attending regularly and building this Open Spaces community, and also to offer a really warm welcome to those of you who are attending for the first time. And I hope that you'll look up for our events next year and join us next year. So we're marking the end of this year's programme with our first Open Symposium, which is open to the public. And I'm so delighted to see that so many of you are here from such a breadth of backgrounds. So I hope that means that we should be able to have a really rich discussion at the end. I'm really excited to introduce our speakers for the night. Composer and aid worker, Professor Nigel Osborne, and NHS England's lead for trauma-informed care, Dr. Angela Kennedy. Individually, they both have extraordinary careers, but they've come together to integrate their experiences of dealing with trauma in the NGO sector and the health services respectively, something of particular importance during the pandemic. Dr. Angela Kennedy is one of the UK's leading innovators in mental health care and probably needs no introduction to many of you. She's a clinical psychologist who's worked in the NHS since 1990, focusing her expertise mainly on the needs of traumatised adults. She's currently the North of England Clinical Network Lead for Mental Health and NHS England Lead for Trauma-Informed Care. She's a former board member of the European Society for Trauma and Dissociation and Compassion Leadership for the SIG Chair of Compassionate Mind Foundation. She also had her own art practice and has been running weekly music for Wellbeing events with a range of musical partners. Her next Make Music Day event is a collaboration between Nigel Osborne, professional musicians and frontline NHS staff that explores the words and sounds of their experiences during COVID. And her desire for better exploration in the future of the interface between mental health and the arts is one I'm sure many of us share here. Angela, I'm really grateful to you for sharing your expertise this evening. Professor Nigel Osborne is a composer, an aid worker. Sorry, I'm introducing both of you first and then I'm going to hand over to both of you. So Professor Nigel Osborne is a composer, an aid worker and a Professor Emeritus of Music and Human Sciences at the University of Edinburgh, who specialises in using music to support children who are victims of conflict. He's had a lifelong interest in music and health, from early years as an auxiliary nurse and music therapist, to more recent pioneering work using music to support children who are victims of conflict in the Balkans, the Caucasus, the Middle East, East Africa and Southeast Asia. With the late Professor Paul Robertson, he co-invented X System, which analyses music to predict its neurophysiological effects and has led to research in a range of areas. And during the pandemic, he's been working with Dr. Angela Kennedy on musical interventions to address mental health issues and is currently preparing a new opera, Nachiketa, to be premiered by Opera Circus at the South Bank, King Lear for Grange Opera, and a musical version of UNESCO's The Rhinoceros for Ulysses Theatre Istria. And Nigel also appears fortuitously to have a loose connection to St George's, so it's wonderful to welcome you back after several decades. And I've been lucky enough to not only to follow your activities, but to experience your music firsthand with Opera Circus in Bosnia. And I'm so excited you're willing to return to St George's, if for one night only. So just before I hand over to Angela, and I promise I will do, there's a little bit of format and housekeeping. So the format, Angela will start us off speaking for around 15 minutes, giving a background to her work, which should be followed by Nigel speaking for 15 minutes, and he's going to talk about his work with trauma. And then there'll be a conversation between the two of them on their joint ventures, such as X System, Recovery College, and NHS Staff Wellbeing Resilience Hubs, and that will last for about half an hour. And that should leave us with at least 20 minutes or more for questions. On the housekeeping, we are recording the event, as you will have seen, and we're asking you to turn off your cameras and microphones during the presentations and the conversation, but we will leave plenty of time for questions at the end, when it will be lovely if you could turn your cameras back on so we can see you. If you're having any technical issues, do please put them in the chat if you can see it, or if you can't, use the email that Thomas has kindly circulated beforehand in the email, and he'll do his best to respond. Likewise, if questions occur to you during the talk, please put them in the chat, and Thomas will gather them up at the end and put them to Andrew and Nigel before we open up to further questions, when it would be great at that point if you could raise your hands, real or electronic, and actually speak. It would be really nice to get a real engagement. And I would particularly like to ask any students who are here, please post some questions in the chat, because your perspectives are the perspectives of the future. So please start scribbling. And Angela, it's my great pleasure to hand over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that introduction. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I think what an amazing series it sounds like you've had. And hopefully you can sign me up for future open events. So yes, as was just introduced, I've worked in the NHS my whole career, so I'm probably quite institutionalised. But one of the things that has really kept me there is really passion to make the lives of people better who struggle with really quite severe mental health difficulties. So I've spent most of the time working with people with schizophrenia, dissociative disorders, and a range of other very long-term conditions. And I think one of the things I realised, not immediately, but after a few years, was how difficult the lives of people had been prior to them becoming unwell. And I came to realise that that was no coincidence. And that led me to this concept of trauma-informed care. So a trauma-informed approach is a system-wide approach to addressing adversity. And it particularly not just looks at the neurobiology, but also the impact on attachment and relationships. So it is a system that's guided by what we know about healing from adversity, but it's relevant to everyone in a system that deals with adversity, because the mental health conditions in itself can be very traumatizing. And also, as mental health officer status used to kind of make a very firm position on, the work with mental health can be traumatizing for our staff too. I think in recent years, we've become much more aware also of some practices, like seclusion, that might actually do harm, which is very difficult for staff to get their heads around. We come in to heal and not do harm, and it's a difficult idea to think that we might be causing people additional difficulties. So trauma-informed care works to create psychologically healthy and rewarding places of work, as well as adequately addressing the needs of people who come for help. So for that reason, it's applicable throughout the system. And if we think about mental health, the kinds of factors that impact on it, we know that things such as equality has an impact. We know issues of safety, not just physical safety, abuse and of various kinds, but also psychological safety and bullying, things like that. We know that issues of social cohesion and justice really make an impact. We know the economy has an impact on the nation's mental health, and particularly the kind of work that people do. We know how fit you are, availability of outside spaces and the quality of those spaces, whether you can access nature. And we know a lot about the impact of war and obviously its converse, peace. We know that culture and the arts and access to them and participation as them impacts on our well-being. We know, as does nutrition. Our own personal connectedness, loneliness is a big risk factor for a lot of mental health problems. And one of the things that's been added to this list, I think, over the pandemic is public services to meet the demand and the way in which public services can meet the demand. Those things all interact together to create not just public mental health issues, but also very specific and unique mental health issues for individuals within our communities. And when I'm talking about trauma, I'm not just talking about kind of single incidents as an adult, and nor am I just talking about issues of childhood abuse. I'm talking about a range of things, really. And one of those is events which provoke fear or pain. That's often what we think of as traumatizing events. But other events can be too. So events which provoke loss, things such as immigration or losing your homeland by becoming a refugee, as well as kind of more obvious bereavements. Events that exclude us from others. So again, if you are homeless, or if you are very isolated, or if you're bullied. Relationships which inflict harm on other people, and a lot of my work has been picking up the pieces and the aftermath of very deliberate acts of harm on children who grow up to be very disturbed as a result of that sexual or physical harm. We also know that things that challenge our sense of reality, so things like gaslighting, is also important. And whilst those things are often kind of classed as those things that we can see happening, often it's the absence of care and neglect that can also be quite pernicious in its kind of leading to mental health problems. And we often forget about that. We also sometimes think that you have to experience these things yourselves, and of course you don't. Witness any of the above is a big risk factor for many mental health problems, and my own research showed how toxic witnessing domestic violence was, and people who later went on to develop psychosis, including schizophrenia. But also I think that's an issue for staff. We bear witness to pain and suffering on a daily basis, and that's why trauma-informed systems of care are needed in the NHS to help our staff to manage what we deal with routinely that other people who are not in the NHS simply could not tolerate. So because complex trauma in particular is very multifaceted, it requires a multi-layered approach to healing. So if you think about what particularly ongoing traumas do, they do affect our biology. It primes us for fight flight, it disconnects us from other people, it disrupts the vagal system, but it also has an impact on how we feel about ourselves, particularly in terms of how self-critical we are, or whether we are impacted by stigma. Generally, it can impact on our attachments and our sense of relationships and place in the world. And then also it affects communities as well. So you can have whole communities that are traumatized or stigmatized by this. So if all of that is multi-layered, then our healing also needs to be multi-layered. And that's not something, multi-layered healing isn't something that's always represented in NHS pathways. So these are just some of the routes that I have witnessed to healings, acceptance, or growth from trauma, because of course all of those are possible. And of course I have put psychological therapy in there because that is one important way, and that's often the only route through for people who come to healthcare, mental health care. But there are other things as well, and we are getting better in the NHS at looking at peer support options. And you can see from a lot of the literature from the emerged after the Holocaust and the Second World War that finding a purpose and having meaning also help create healing. We know that caring for other people and putting your energy into that is also a place of growth. Finding activities that can absorb you is also helpful. And I'm not just talking about kind of mindfulness-based activities, but I'm talking generally, if you find a sense of purpose and something that can really ground you in the here and now, even if it's something like car maintenance, it really helps. Being grounded in the here and now actually helps, because once you're grounded in the here and now, it can be argued that you're no longer affected by the trauma. We know that nature is very healing, in particular working with nature. We know that work also is very therapeutic. We know physical activity helps regulate the body from the impact of the neurobiological impact. We know that a lot of people find purpose through political engagement, particularly around some of those issues where people are traumatized, where there isn't justice, but also creativity. And there are lots of theories of creativity that are really mirror a lot of our theories of psychological healing from trauma. And I've been really interested in pursuing that. So as mentioned, I mean, I have had an art practice. So bringing in creative approaches to my therapy has been part of what I've done and always done, but it's always felt like I've maybe been doing slightly something that isn't maybe slightly allowed. And I think what we're becoming much more aware of is how creativity can really help push those things on. So I would have used it routinely in EMDR to help the process happen. So in terms of trauma-informed care, we had a summit a couple of years ago looking at lots of good practice narratives. We collected about 60 examples of good practice from around the UK, and we analysed those very rapidly. So it was a system. It's kind of akin to qualitative analysis, but it's a co-produced qualitative analysis done by the people who submit those narratives. And from that, we came up with a number of factors that really helped the implementation of trauma-informed care. So there's structural aspects, as might be expected. So no gaps in access for people with varying needs. We need to look at the interplay between physical and mental health. We need to look at support for innovation and having clear pathways, particularly for psychological first aid or mutual support. In terms of interpersonal things, you know, we need to be tolerant of our colleagues who might also have a backstory. We need to promote empathic leaders, not just ones that are very good at the transactional aspects, because what we found was that leadership and a compassionate leadership fell out really significantly as having a role to play in the implementation of this system-wide approach. Yes, we do need to think also about the interventions that we have, but also the way those interventions are framed. So are we allowing choice? And a lot of our pathways don't allow choice because it just says, well, the evidence says you should be getting this. And I think when it comes to recovery from trauma, if you don't allow choice, you're automatically blocking one route through, because people who are traumatized are often very disempowered. So I think to think about encouraging local solutions, to think about normalization and creating physical safety is very important. We've also worked on a reflective culture tool that looks at the various factors of implementation, and that's available if anybody wants to look at it. It was developed through a Delphi process. We also have an NHS Futures collaboration platform for trauma-informed care. If anyone wants to join, it's Anne Richardson, the name is there. We run regular webinars. We develop various good practice documents. We have an active chat function. And in terms of the journey with Nigel, what an extraordinary and rewarding journey that has been. And before we go on to talk more about that, I'm going to let Nigel describe some of his work before we came together. So I will stop sharing.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was great. Thank you. Could you tell me, Deborah, am I now audible?
You're very audible. Yes.
Oh, wow. That's good. Thank you.
And visible. And tell me when you want your slides.
Right. So anyway, just a delight to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'll tell the other side of the story, because this has been a remarkable, with Angela, the ship of life brought some magnificent gifts for me when it sailed in with this opportunity to collaborate with Angela and her colleagues. And my background to it is also one from trauma, but from a different angle. And in fact, one of the reasons that we decided to work together was to put together, as Deborah said, the experience of the NHS in dealing with trauma-informed care, and maybe other experiences from the NGO sector, non-governmental organisation. So how did I end up there? Well, I was always interested as a musician in music therapy and music health, music and medicine. When I think a crucial formative experiences happened when I studied abroad. I studied in Eastern Europe and saw what a huge difference music made to people's lives, to their feelings, things about themselves, their things about the world. And we see that everywhere, but in those particular extreme circumstances, it became clear that time there were big social changes afoot, and how much it meant to people. When I came back to the UK, I decided I would try and put that into practice in music therapy. And there was no accreditation, no certification in those days. And so you got access by things like occupational therapy or nursing to patients. So I took the auxiliary nursing route and various others, improvised my way through access to patients. And that's how I came to have this rather informal long distance link to St George's, because it was responsible for nursing training in one of the institutions, Horton Hospital, and that's now no longer existing, I'm afraid, but a very good psychiatric hospital that you took care of at one point. When I was there. So that's 50 years ago, a small link. Other things I developed also were music in the community, not just therapy, but seeing that that could extend to community work, that we could bridge therapeutic and community work in all sorts of ways, and also into education, that in education we could combine these values. And that's become important again right now. Maybe we'll talk about that later. My link to trauma came later. And see the first slide, please, Deborah. I was involved in human rights work in Bosnia-Herzegovina. We'll probably see it soon. It's going to come. And going back to 1992, I was working in Sarajevo, trying to stop the war, basically, and failing to do so. It was a terrible war. It was, I embarked on the human rights work because I couldn't watch my friends dying on television. I had a lot of friends there. I couldn't listen to the lies that were being told about the conflict. It was not a civil war. A country was invaded. There were no ancient ethnic hatreds whatsoever, quite the reverse. There was not a nest of Islamic fundamentalism in the center of Europe. There was a beautiful, generous, open Islam in Bosnia, worth protecting at all costs. So anyway, so I worked on human rights, and as I was failing, I realized in the city of Sarajevo there were some things that I could do that wouldn't fail. I saw the situation for children in a dreadful state, no school, locked up in their homes, shells falling at random all over the place. You left home, shut the door as if for the last time. Crossing a street, a crossroads, you had to run at random to avoid the snipers catching you from the mountains. Children had to see all kinds of stultifying, dreadful experiences, quite apart from being near to starvation and what have you. So I talked to artist friends that, is there something we can do about this? And they said, yes, we've thought about this for a long time, but look at us, we're walking stones. We need to do this as a collaboration if we're going to do it. So we made a collaboration, doing art with children. We had no objectives other than to distract the children from the horrors. We did not have clinical goals. We just wanted to give the children something nice in their terrible lives, something fulfilling. But we started getting very interesting results. Parents would come and say, look, our kids are sleeping better after your sessions. Of course, we took big risks with the sessions, but there were deep cellars in Sarajevo built by the Austro-Hungarians that were pretty impermeable to the caliber of shells that were coming into the city. So we had some measure of protection for the children. And fortunately, through the whole time, we had no accidents, I'm glad to say. So we developed a creative work, particularly with music, other arts as well. And then along came a representative from the Ministry of Health, Dr. Cengic, who said, can we assess your project? The Ministry of Health, despite the siege of the city, was still kind of operational. And they completed their study and said, will you please scale this up? We think you have a very effective therapeutic program. They had used the word, we had. So we did develop it, and developed it into Mostar, a very big program reaching 3,000 children a week in Retva Canton. And we developed it in many other places across the world, Chechnya, and around the world, the principles. Very important question is, why was what we're doing working? I'd never experienced in my life anything where we'd gone so far ahead in practice of theory. We're led by the children primarily, but we've got these tremendous results. You could see it, children feedback, but we couldn't explain it. Fortunately, there was at that time a rapidly growing sort of platform of neurophysiology, endocrinology, other studies, particularly the fruits of various forms of brain scanning, fMRI, EEG, through to positron emission tomography, all kinds of data that were actually revealing that music does affect the mind and body. We had lived in a 300-year pause in music medicine where, we think music changes you, but we don't know why, so therefore it cannot qualify to be part of medicine in any way. And suddenly this evidence started flowing in. That we were able to justify and see at the right moment the things that we were doing and understand them. So, for example, in trauma, very, very common for children to have a heart rate which is 5 to 6 beats per minute above normal, permanent kind of high tone in the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system driving the heart. And music has a very regulating effect on the heart and the autonomic system. So we could see that happen. We could help regulate and unlock those things. Breathing. Children with trauma, as Angela was mentioning, the vagal system is dysregulated, very often comes in hesitating breathing. And the result, is that with music, we can, in all kinds of ways, release breath through singing, all kinds of exercises. We can very, very strong results. We can affect movement. Movement repertoires change in trauma. Children can get either very sluggish, Oliver Sacks used to express it like this, or hyperactive, and all sorts of things in between. And music is very interactive with the body and movement. It can help us regulate our movement, so we can catch children who are hyperactive and slow them down with music and regulate them. And they like us to do that. And we can take children who are sluggish and we can get them moving. And the body's chemistry. Let's talk about only one of the many things affected in trauma, the one most talked about, cortisol. What happens when someone's traumatized, cortisol levels, of course, go sky high, but then if it's chronic, they go too low. There's a paradoxical effect, the HPA axis. And there again, music is hugely interactive with the HPA axis and cortisol. It can help it to flow, to regulate it, to stimulate it. It's a wonderful regulating mechanism. We'll go to the next slide, everyone. Then we can see a whole series of things, biopsychological, social set of things in trauma that we can achieve through music, ranging the physical things I'm talking about, so sympathy, empathy, concentration, imagination, creativity, joy, comfort, positivity, self-respect, socialization, all kinds of things we can achieve through music with trauma. I'd like to show a film. I know I've gone a little bit over, I hope we're all right, which is made by Cat Stevens, Yusuf Islam, of my work in Lebanon. It was a part of the project he sponsored, so he presents it as only part of the project. In fact, it's been ongoing for 5 years, but working with Syrian refugee children in the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon.
Hiya. Hiya. La 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 la. Allah Dalona, Dalona.
I have a very interesting story. So it was the end of the 1990s. I was in Albania, meeting refugees coming over the border from Kosovo. I was dealing with groups who just arrived, and I got the kids together. It was a pilot. I was looking to what we might do in the future. And we wrote a song. They wrote a song. I helped them. And they liked their song. And so they said, can we sing it to our parents? And I said, yeah, sure, if you can go and fetch them. So they scattered, and a few minutes later came back with parents, rather bemused. And the parents stood there and listened, and we sang in Albanian the song that they'd created. And then one of the guys stepped forward. He said, listen, our family came over the mountains 2 nights ago. You know, we were in Jakova, our house was burnt down. We have absolutely nothing. We've been on the road, you know, trekking through the mountains. We've got nothing. They burnt everything. You can't burn down a song, can you?
It's me, Nigel. Szarafna. Ana min Skotlanda.
أنا من سوريا.
Surya, bravo.
My name is Nigel Osborne. I'm a musician. A creative musician, I like to think. I began this work by total accident.
Yes, it's just beginning. It's nascent. We're beginning to develop the methods, and the idea is that in the new music sector.
But I was working at the beginning of the war in Bosnia, trying to support the Bosnians. And when I was there, I saw the situation of children.
Ja mislim da su djeca traumatizirana. Totalno, tek se sada počinje opuštati, ali te opuštanje tek pokazuje te traume na djecu. Tek se sada traume otkrivaju.
With local artists, we started a program with no grand intentions. We wanted to amuse, divert, distract the children from the horrors around them, give them some fun. At the time there was no school, there was nothing else for them to do. And it was only when we started the work we realized we were in touch with something a bit more powerful. I knew Syria well before the war, and it broke my heart to see what was happening, and so I wanted to try and do something.
We're on our way to Borelias, and the idea of the day is the first of 2 major rehearsals for our performance on the 30th of June. And also for today, I have a job to do in that we're putting together, by the kind permission of Cat Stevens, a version of his wonderful song Peace Train, which could not be more appropriate. Well, I will need 1 mic for voice and 1 for guitar.
So we will start by the sound of a train.
Yes, okay? That's right.
Then,
good.
Okay, then we will sing.
Yeah.
And they start, Maxime.
Yeah, very good.
Okay?
Yeah, very good. Okay. Sometimes I get a bit nervous about these things because it is a big challenge. Children, you know, really quite vulnerable, stand up on stage and perform. For us, it's important for the families. You know, the children have this benefit in themselves, but the sense of the community. Not very much happens in this community like this. It's pretty unique. So I want it to be a great event for the community. Salto yalo haya la man wa 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 la 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 haya kitar al salam haya kitar al salam haya kitar al salam. Bravo. Again.
The situation in Syria.
Syria is simply far worse. That horrific attack in Syria.
The ongoing war in Syria have
triggered chemical attack in Syria.
Number of refugees, according to the UN, has
chemical attacks in Syria.
Wave upon wave of refugees washing up on these shores.
Syrians have fled their country because they are the victims of a very dirty war. The children here have usually been bombed and burnt out of their homes, and then had the trauma of a difficult and dangerous journey. These people live in tents made of tarpaulin, cardboard, matchwood and plastic bags. You have seen it. There are various ways of explaining trauma. Children losing hope is children losing joy, children losing control of their bodies because of the physical effects of trauma, and losing respect for themselves.
A lot of kids have never known Syria. You know, we're beginning to get in school now with our 7-year-olds, children born here, who have never known Syria, only can see the mountains. It's really sad. Can you imagine, you know, being shut out of the United Kingdom, never allowed to go back, and being able to see the cliffs of Dover?
For refugee children, normality is tremendously important because they live in abnormality. What we offer here in school and in our programs is a normality in this space. This has walls and a roof and a window, and there are tables and chairs. And that's very important. It's how human beings respect themselves. No, I don't recognize them. I don't think they're in school yet.
I have seen ila bedin, ir word in fetak, jual besatin. I have seen ila bedin, ir word in fetak, jual besatin.
Our job is to give them the security of home, and that's what we're doing in our performance. We're going home on an imaginary train, and we're traveling through Syria. I think through the program, we have given children an appetite for learning and developing. When we began with the children, the atmosphere was hyper. And the change once we started the harmonics program in the school was palpable. And we see the children smiling and laughing a lot more. We see them more in control of their bodies. I'd already planned to do this thing about trains, about the railway lines of Syria and Lebanon, and now no longer, I'm afraid, existing, but once joined all the urban centres together, where these kids come from. So this railway has quite a profound significance. These kids are travelling in their imaginations home. And wouldn't it be a great idea in, you know, the war of Syria to travel back home on a peace train?
You know, there's an informed optimism, there's a hard optimism, even a slightly kind of depressive optimism that I work on, that is on the theory that one just slogs on as long as that is life, is it not? You keep going until they knock you over. Isn't that not the principle?
I think we are very deeply musical. Music is the way we tell one another how we feel. I can take what's inside me and through music give it to you. That's the process of music therapy. Many people ask me why I don't go for psychotherapy as I work in this area. And I would if I felt I needed to. Even though I've seen some terrible things, I have had the privilege with children of sharing their journey out of those things and into good energy and good feelings every day. In a sense, the children were my therapists. I would like to have a legacy of nothing. I would like to leave a space for people to find new things, explore this fascinating territory. On the peace train.
Thank you. Shall I, Angela, would you like to introduce this, or shall I go into X system now?
Yes, you go into that and I'll join you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is just a technology developed with the late Paul Robertson. I'm delighted that Paul's wife, Chika, has been working so closely with us on all of these projects with Angela and everything. And without Chika, there would be nothing. So thank you, Chika. Here we are. Going on to the next slide. I'd like to talk about how music and our bodies are so intimately tuned to one another. Here is looking at the skin conductance, which is a measure of autonomic activity, and heart rate. So skin conductance above, heart rate below. There's somebody listening to Holst's Venus from the planets. Just look what happens. Oops. Turn the video on. You can see how intimately the body is following the music. It's like there's a whole music score going on. If you add, and that's just the autonomic nervous system or aspects, or if you add to that the endocrine system, the chemistry changes, breathing, all of those other things, muscle tension, oxygenation, you would get a bigger score, much more complex than the music itself. So that's the power of music in relation to the body. It is a very beautiful, precise map, music of the body and the body of music, which is why with X System, we've designed a way of predicting the effects of music on the body. Next slide, please. So that we can use this in a precise prediction so that we can use it in clinical purposes. We model the whole of the brain from the brain stem up to the motor cortex, auditory cortex, limbic system. We model all of these aspects of processing of music, and you'll see on the left-hand panel in a moment a series of graphs from the bottom of the brain to the top, tracing those predictions. Out of those predictions, we get our color circle. We can place a song. Here is Misty, Ella Fitzgerald, and it's sitting. The bottom is low arousal, the top is high arousal. So it's medium to low arousal, gentle song. Left to right is negative to positive valence, emotion. It's vagal power. And here we are on the positive side of vagal power, but not too far, because this is quite a melancholy song. And then when we've got those values, we can then put together lists where we can lead people when we know exactly where that song is, and we know that somebody is feeling melancholy, being a little bit depressed. Help me feel better. We can take you step by step up the circle and rightwards in the circle to positive values. Anyway, let's just hear, if you just click on Deborah, we'll just see how the analysis works with the song. with accuracy the effect on the body of the song. Heart rate, for example, we have 95% success in predicting changes in heart rate and extent of change from resting rate. And then when we've got this data, as I say, we can make entrainment lists where we can take people where they want to go emotionally in their feelings. The next slide, please. Thank you. And so for our platform that Angela described for the Recovery College Online, we have a series of opportunities, different playlists that we can invite people to engage in. Enliven me, I'm feeling a bit sluggish. Enliven me, I'm okay. I'm okay, relax me. I'm calm, relax me. I'm really hyper, relax me. Explore moods and feelings and specific issues in mental health, then care homes where we have special lists for certain situations in care homes, and so on. So there we are, and also breathing exercises. I don't think we have time for today, but we have those two, breathing to music. So perhaps I could hand over back to Angela to say something about some of our activities and connections through music and so on and so forth.
Shall I unshare the screen?
Yes, I think so.
Can you see my screen? Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Yes, in the small form, not, yeah.
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 Yes, so I met Nigel, I think it must be about 5 or 6 years ago now, Nigel, wasn't it? And we were looking at some putting together with Northumbria University some research projects around this area. And I have to say, in spite of our best efforts, we're being turned down. But what happened just before the pandemic, Nigel came down to talk at one of the Trauma Innovation Days about his work, really inspired people here. And then when the pandemic hit, we were looking at ways of putting lots of materials onto the Recovery College Online. So the Recovery College Online is not just the online platform of our Recovery College, it is actually an online Recovery College. So it is user-led, service user-led, and we put lots of stuff on there around coping with COVID. We had already worked with them to do our staff training around major incidents and preparation for this kind of thing. So that was already on there. That was launched just as the pandemic was starting to hit. And so as part of that repertoire, Nigel and his X-System team really generously came up with this Music for Wellbeing site within the Recovery College Online as part of the resources. And when we put them out there, you know, I think even though there was a lot of support for it from the Trust because of how he'd blown people away at the Innovation Day, I think it was also perceived that it was probably, you know, a nice added extra, you know, to all of the evidence-based things that were there. But actually what happened was that it really blew all of the other hits on there out of the water. So we had something like 20,000 hits on this bit of the website, which far outstripped all the other bits that we had put on. So clearly there was an appetite for this and people were finding it helpful. And I think, yeah, so in terms of the evaluation of the playlist, you can see here that the university team looked at how people felt that it impacted on them physically, emotionally, in terms of their relationships, their valence and sense of meaning, and all of that pretty much expanded outwards positively, with the exception of the relational aspect, which is probably what you would expect. So very, very positive outcome data, which if we were to get clinical outcome data like that, we'd all be, you know, immediately looking for RCTs and putting this in NICE. So we thought, okay, I was then asked as the pandemic went on, NHS England, as you're well aware, gave lots of money for our staff wellbeing hub. And so setting that up regionally, we've also tied it in there. And our staff wellbeing hub is based on trauma-informed principles. So relationships are the basis of recovery, whole system thinking, strengths-based approach, empowerment, and addressing complexity. And this is what our staff Wellbeing toolkit looks like. And you can see there's lots and lots of resources on there. There's breathing exercises, there's exercise videos, there are numerous resources, but the music stuff is part of this very, very important offer, which again is proven very popular with staff. And so, I mean, we've done a few other things as well along the way, but for this time last year, for Make Music Day, we did an event that was crafted to help people grieve. So Nigel and Chika Robertson pulled some of their professional musicians together that they knew, and we put that together with a celebrant, and we crafted an emotional journey, or they crafted an emotional journey that really helped people to let go, given all of our usual rituals and connections for saying goodbye were very disrupted, and that remains as a resource now. So we've continued to work on various collaborations, including care home events. And this was the care home, some of the care home events, and you can see people up dancing in the living room, you know, in their masks and PPE with their carers. It was quite an amazing event. With the amazing Alistair Sutherland. And, you know, again, some of the feedback from that is that it's really hitting parts of well-being that other things simply aren't reaching. So our next collaboration is for this Make Music Day, Sunday the 20th of June. It's at 2 o'clock, so hopefully some of you will join us. So what Nigel has done this time is we have put a call out for NHS musicians, and Nigel and some other musicians have worked with those musicians to make their songs as good as can be, and we've professionally produced them. But also, one of the very special things that has happened is that Nigel has worked with some frontline staff and groups of staff, as he would have done with people in those war zones, to compose something that represents their experience. And you will hear, if you join the event on the 20th, not all of the experience is negative, but you will see that there's certainly journeys through experiences, including some that are, you know, where staff have maintained their humour, and that was really good to see. So I think I can stop there. Yeah, so Nigel, I mean, it really has been a journey, hasn't it, the last 18 months?
Wow,
What
yes.
has happened and emerged from this collaboration and the youthfulness of your playlists and the X system to describe how we can help people.
Yeah.
It's been extraordinary.
Yes, but also from Andrew, thanks to you and thanks for this link, I think a number of doors swung open for us in music and music medicine that were closed before. So, for example, if it's possible, Deborah, to show slide 12 of my second presentation, if you're there, Deborah.
Yeah, I'm here.
So just slide 12, and quickly go through some of the things that might be of interest to people. I know we should stop in a second, but just to give an idea of what. So we've been developing things in care homes, as you mentioned, very important. And so it's slide number 12 of my set. So it's if we go, there we are. And if you go to the next one now, yes, that's just the title. There we go. So we've been looking at in psychiatric care. We're able, for example, with music and using X system, we're able to calm people who need to be calmed in very organic, effective ways. Care of the elderly, we're able in care homes to help people organize their day, help people wake up, go to sleep, even get moving, and for lunch. Trauma-informed care, which we covered, which we're very busy in. Perinatal care, this is very interesting. We're looking at right the way from third trimester to early sort of breastfeeding to using music to help a bonding of mother and baby and partner, father, or whoever is there, in a joint musical journey that will encourage relaxation, well-being, and the qualities and the states of mind and body that will help through childbirth and pregnancy. And then even through prevention of nocturnal seizures in children with rare epilepsies. This is a project that was actually began in Columbia University in the States and in Queen Square, the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery, with Michael Trimble, who's former consultant, Dale Hesdorfer, but which has become our project, a joint one, which is that one of the most challenging things for children with epilepsies is nocturnal seizures, of course, children and their families. And can we prevent them with music? Music does have an entrainment effect on the electrical activity of the brain. And what we're doing at the moment, I was saying, and we've had some good results in using music, what we're looking at now is, can we actually match music to the normal brain activity of an epileptic child? Can we take what is their healthy, normal, stabilized activity? Can we look at those frequencies and can we stabilize them by entrainment through music? And we're at the moment working with in Zagreb, as it happens, in a hospital, taking extensive nocturnal EEGs and looking at how we may be able to affect this process. It's looking very, very promising. And if this works, a lot of other things are going to work that are very important. There's a process called sonification. We take the frequencies of the EEGs that are relevant from the relevant electrodes and areas, and we literally turn them to sound. And we use that sound and X system to find the music that most corresponds to those frequency profiles. And of course, not sometimes directly, indirectly at phase lock. Sometimes we're dealing with frequencies that's not always immediately present in music, but maybe related to musical frequencies. So that's that. Things like that we're doing that I think are really, really interesting. And I have to thank Angela for all of that, because without this very special relationship over the last year, a lot of the doors that swung open would not have swung open. And I'm grateful for that. And the whole agenda of music medicine has, it's been put back where it should be. It got taken off the agenda by the age of reason that didn't understand why it worked. Now we know why it works, so it can come back. And we have a gentle art of music medicine that will not achieve drastic things. It can achieve subtle things that can make a difference. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the way that this next event is using the idea of collective healing, Nigel, I think is going to be quite important, for our staff in terms of their well-being. This isn't about pathologizing their distress. This is about bringing them together, processing it through the kind of making their experience into something else external, these beautiful songs, and then everybody collectively listening and identifying and then processing this. It's we've kind of individualized distress, haven't we, a lot? And this is a way of bringing people together to really use the best of what we know about how music works to help people grow together to heal, which is a fantastically generous thing, I think.
Yes, it's a really nice thing. Crucial thing you said, not pathologizing. Those where I would make strong arguments for, the neurophysiological effects of music. Its biggest effects is that you're not conscious of that. You don't think about it. You just do it and have it and enjoy it. And so, in a sense, it is a wonderful way of participating in something that can be therapeutic without it feeling like that, which is really important. It's also a moment to develop this. I think it is a moment in time in health and education. I wonder, could we listen to a little bit to finish one of the songs?
That would be lovely, yeah.
I believe that we may have a copy. This is a song written by a nurse and therapist who had challenges for inevitably during the last year, and this is her rather lovely, sad but very lovely statement of how she managed to surface again and keep herself going. It's called Peonies because it was when she saw some peonies on occasion was a turning point. But can we hear a little bit of that? This is composed, and this is composed by the nurse. I am simply the amanuensis. I'm helping her write it down, remember the tunes, choose harmonies, things like that. So here we are, Peonies.
Searching to Finding the courage to feel easy, to walk barefoot in the sand, finding the things and the way to be thankful to those who took my hand.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Thank you. Thank you. It was breaking up a bit, but you get the idea anyway.
I mean, having watched you create these pieces, though, Nigel, you do a lot more than just write things down. You know, you're very expert at facilitating the process for people. So the songs were not created by people with musical experience, or you know, these are NHS staff, and you pulled out of them something and made it into something beautiful. And yes, it was truly pulled out of them and shaped from what their experience. You don't kind of push it down a particular route. It was quite extraordinary to watch the process, but very skilled, and not, I think you underestimated what you did. But I guess we're open to questions now, aren't we, Nigel, if you're up for that?
Absolutely, yes we are.
Thank you so much, Andrew and Nigel. That was completely fascinating and just wonderful. It's like music to my ears, sorry the pun, but just to have the sort of the measuring, the integration within the NHS, within healthcare, but also, as you said, Nigel's really intuitive, really creative approach, and actually match them up and make them sort of weave, you know, through in each other. It's really, really inspiring, and it's very exciting. Thomas, are you able to gather up some of the questions from the chat? Because I can see there's quite a few that have been pinging in. So I wondered if you wanted to try and present some of those to Nigel, Angela, and then after that, please feel free to put your cameras on and we can see you and hear you all. Thomas, are you able to do that?
Yes, sure. I've got two questions so far. I'll just remove the camera block for everyone so we can see anyone who wants to turn their cameras on. Yes, so we've got one question from Alison who asks, do you feel that rhythm and or harmony / pitch are equally important in the healing process observed?
Shall I answer that one?
Yes.
The answer is yes, and in different ways and different times. For music therapy, we need all of the flowers in the garden, different kinds of things. And we're very lucky because on our planet, you know, the real musical genome of the planet is one of a variety of musics, where in some rhythm is important, some pitch more important, some harmony more important. And we're able to draw on that in our work. So, for example, when I have children who are hyperactive, I want to help them to slow down and to control themselves. I go to where they are. I find the music that is closest to their level of excitement and arousal. So I'll go to West African music, possibly. I'll go to something really rhythmically powerful to catch them. That I'll get that from Africa, possibly. I can get it in other musics as well, but why can't I take it from Africa? African musicians are delighted that we do that. This is not appropriation. This is sharing of the gifts of humanity. And so also, if I have something that requires deep emotional modulation of some kind, I may go to one of the cultures that has strong melodic emotional leaning. Arabic music, Indian music. As I was singing to the kids, already immediately in a place of a kind of blithe questioning. cheerfulness. So we're able to navigate emotionally and melody very strongly, and harmony, which underpins that and then can generate often mood. And so we may use harmony for mood. That is when we have emotions that are sustained. Feelings are when we're conscious of emotions. Moods are when those things are sustained, and those harmony very often helps sustain. So I would say that all are important and all have their moments. And the ideal therapeutic experiences is when they're all working together and working well.
Are there any other questions? I can see a few students popping up, which is lovely. So I'm hoping you might feel courageous enough to ask a question.
Yeah, we've got one more text question, but after this, please do feel free to stick your virtual hand up and ask things verbally. We've got a text question from Anna, who thanks you for a fascinating talk and asks whether such predictions have been of use in a different way, to see what song a person feels like in listening to as reflective of their mood, to help with working with, and please excuse me, I'm not a medic, so I will mispronounce this, alexithema.
Yes, so I think that certainly, first of all, we do have with X system a diagnostic system. We use sensors, and we are using simple ones at the moment. We're using heart rate. We're increasingly using heart rate variability, which is a very good indicator to vagal power. In other words, how positively we have the heart is showing high arousal. We don't know whether that person is, angry or happily excited, or low arousal, whether they are peacefully sleepy or depressed. And with HRV, we can get some idea as to which of those it is. And so that's very helpful. Even without taking endocrine measures, we can get a very strong hook on emotions and on moods. So yes, we do, and we can turn it round and reinforce, change, modulate mood. In a sense, in a way, with the epilepsy work, that's what we're doing. We're meeting the children where they are and trying to help them stabilize the best of their conditions in electrical brain activity. So yes, we can turn it on its head, and we do. And I'm very optimistic that we can deal with many treatments in that way.
Lovely. That's all the questions I have in the chat at the moment. Please do feel free to continue to type if you're more comfortable with that. But yeah, the floor's open if anyone wants to.
Yeah, would any of you like to put your hand up either electronically or just wave it if you've got your video on? So we can have some more questions. And I would really, really encourage, I know it's really mean to do this, but any of the students, I can actually see a few of you, if there's an observation or even a comment, because a lot of you are interested in music and you are going to be the ones taking this forward in some way. So even if you've got an observation to sort of share with the speakers, or a question or something that might relate to possibly your future practice. Well done, Elena. Thank you. I was looking at you. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Oh, pardon me. That will be me. Sorry. One moment. There we go. Everyone should be able to turn their microphone on.
Perfect. Thank you, and thank you for unmuting me. I just wanted to say thank you for the talk. It was really interesting. I don't have any specific questions, but just want to say that it definitely impacted the way I think about music, because I'm really into music anyway, but the way I think about it in practice, because I'm a medical student. So I like to think it will inspire me for the future. And yeah, thank you for the talk.
Thank you. So I do hope it will inspire, because it is. I mean, it's not. We shouldn't dramatize what we can do with music. It's very small. It's very, very small what we can achieve in pain reduction, in the various things that are useful in medicine. But they're nice small things. They come without side effects, and they come in ways that people are very happy to accept. And so we can do big things. So if the big things come in, helping with things like Parkinson's, we can do quite dramatic things at certain phases, there are things that can, and with trauma, some of our results are pretty pleasingly good. That they can outperform most medications. And so there are things where we're a little bit more dramatic, but most of all, it's extremely subtle, but it's a matter of small things that matter, I think. And so that's why I would warmly encourage everybody, medical students. I was lucky when in Edinburgh, I helped found Medical Humanities, which is equivalent to this department, and was lucky to have generations of wonderful medical students working with us on all kinds of things and seeing how magic that was. The magical things happened and things that were truly to do with healing and science happened. So I'm warmly encourage you.
Thank you, Elena. It is really lovely to have some voice from the student body as well. And I'm just noticing there's Darren's got his hand up. There was also a comment from Jenny Hyam, who's our principal at St George's, who's said it was a brilliant talk, but also asked if you had problems getting it funded. And I have to say we are really lucky at St George's with this programme. We've got amazing support from Jenny and from Jane Saffel, and Georgie's backing this sort of programme, because they're not easy to get going. Do either of you, Angela, perhaps to start with, and Nigel, have any thoughts on the funding?
What funding? I mean, the playlists were generously created by Nigel and his colleagues, and the Recovery College Online, that platform existed, so we could slot them in. The other events that we've organised, they've been mostly as volunteers, and then the most recent event, the one with that we're doing for staff as part of the Staff Wellbeing Hub, then yes, the Staff Wellbeing Hubs are generously funded, from scratch, with a requirement to spend the money to set things up and spend it quite quickly. So we were able to give some funding to that. And without that small funding, it probably couldn't have been ended up being as good. I mean, the professional musicians, we've been able to pay them, and the engineers, has been fantastic. But no, we didn't have any funds at all, actually. And it's been pulled out the bag because we were in lockdown and we had time, and Nigel is very generous.
Thank you. And also, just generally speaking, it's difficult to get funding. I mean, the epilepsy funding we're doing in Croatia, because I've been working with the children's home there and a group of pediatricians for many years, and they believe in this project, and they sneaked it in to the hospital schedule of ongoing recordings, and we're doing it that way. And my son and I are doing the analysis. It is it is an improvisation, but I do have optimism that it will change. It has to, because it is such a cost-effective way of doing things. Ironically, creative arts in health cost very little to achieve significant things, and so I'm hoping that at some point the truth dawns and we have a slightly easier path than we have had. It is, I'll make no bones about it. It's very, very hard, and you're looking at Mr. Rejected application here. You can't see it written on my face. It should be for years and years in this work, but fortunately we're still going. And those who rejected us sometimes have eaten their words, and we're still making progress. I have optimism that we'll get there.
Nigel, I think every artist and musician I know has got rejection on their face, but you have achieved so much. That is absurd. But to do what you've done with so little money is just amazing, completely amazing. Darren has got his hand up, and then there's Stephanie Schwonder. Darren.
Hello. Hi, Nigel. So lovely to see you.
Hi, Darren. Lovely to hear your voice. Always brings even more sunshine into the day. Thank you.
Thank you. And hi, Angela. Really lovely to hear what you have to say. You may have just answered my question, actually, but with what you've been saying about funding. But I'm interested into what is the potential for this to infiltrate deeper into the NHS, and is there any interest from higher up the echelons in terms of management, or making this a more integral part of NHS work, particularly in social care? yeah, I'm just interested to know where you think this might go.
Yes, I mean, very interestingly, some people in NHS England put us forward for to be a case study on their what's it called? Mind blank, but they're putting together lots of case studies on kind of learning from the pandemic. And this is one of their case studies. So I think there is interest there. And then they put us forward for a national award, a government award of good practice. So it was really good to be shortlisted and nominated. We didn't win, but I mean, amazing that we were, you know, as a project like this was included in that, because we were sat alongside, you know, the team that was delivering the national vaccination programme and things like that. So yes, I think there is interest. There is no funding streams though that feels it's responsible for it. You know, I'm trying to weave it into things and make links for Nigel with some of his projects as much as I can. So the perinatal work, for example, linking him with the work that happens in the clinical networks, and the perinatal arm of that, and the maternity arm of that. But I think that NHS England may well, certainly in terms of the staff wellbeing aspect, I see a lot of interest there, and I think there may be some things happening there. I know the Royal College of Nursing have been doing something with a musician as well, something along similar lines. So maybe, but you know, it's uncertain times, and at the moment it's very hard to know where the money's going to land, where people's motivation is going to end up, and whether this, you know, these open doors continue. I would like to think in a year's time that it's there is a no-brainer and people see the benefit of bringing the arts into health, particularly I think as a starting point being for that collective healing process that we need for our staff. I think that would be a really timely way in, and once we evidence that, then it'll open other doors too. But you know, it's very uncertain times.
I wonder, we just got 10 minutes left. There's two more people I'd like to bring in because they've got their hand up. There's a Stephanie and a Temitope, and I'm really sorry if I've pronounced your names wrongly. Just before that, I wonder whether it's worth bringing Tina in, Tina Golden, who is a past master at getting funding for arts, the music and healing. I don't know if you want to say anything, Tina, because you've been more successful than almost anyone I know in gaining funding and coping with the rejection.
Just in the name of being equitable, we also have a question from Judith in the chat that I think came just before.
Oh, well done. Sorry, I can't see it. I can only see the hand.
Yeah, I think it'd be much more useful to carry on with the present questionnaires. You know, Nigel and I work really closely together, and whatever he knows, I knows, and vice versa. So I can't be any help here, I don't think.
Okay, well, thank you, Tina. So if we're being equitable, should we go to was there Stephanie, a Temitope, and then you had Judith in the chat, is that right?
Maybe Stephanie, Judith, and then Temitope, and then we've got one
and then
more
I think we'll need to close, unfortunately. Okay. Yes, so Stephanie.
Hi, thank you first of all for inviting me. That's super nice. I'm at Bournemouth University. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. And it was thanks to Tina that I knew about it, and Nigel. We go back a little while because of Tina and working in the Balkans. And I'm a social anthropologist, so not coming from the psychological area, but I just, worked with young people in Kosovo and through music elicitation, music exploration in some ways. But now I just want a new project working in Albania with young people at risk of pathways to crime. We got huge FCO and home office funding, and we're looking at hip hop. So I was listening to you with absolutely utter fascination again. And I was just thinking again how things possibly can be turned around. Because there's this very contested debate, isn't there, about grime music and hip hop music and rap music of being having a negative influence on young people, sort of stirring up aggression. And I just wondered, you with your expertise. I mean, this is really a contested field, isn't it? Very much pro and contra arguments there. I just wondered what your perspective is on that.
Yeah.
So can you
very, very
use
interesting.
aggression?
Yes, well, I think one of the first things, one of the nice things about hip hop is it is one of the ways that has kind of become internationally socially identified with kids who have grudges being able to express them, and young people who are angry being able to express that anger, and that's good. And so and the fact that you have this form that has vigorous rhythm where you can improvise verbally, you don't have to sing, it makes it very accessible, and you can beatbox and all kinds of things that make it very democratic. So big pluses all around. I think it's a matter of common sense. A little anecdote: in Bosnia towards the end of the war, I was working in a very traumatized, brutalized village where there were also a lot of recently demobilized soldiers, and there was a proposal to send a hip hop group to do a show in the village, and I said, no, please, not now. Let's send some African drummers. We had some. Let's do something live that's responsive. Let's have the part machine, part voice thing. And the result of that was the equipment was wrecked. There was the knifing and a lot of violence. There are moments where you have to take great care. I think it's a matter of common sense. It's very interesting. It is a very sharp knife, and the same knife that can perform superb surgery can also damage people badly. And I think so. Use the sharp knife well is my thing, but do use it. I think there are situations that can get through to that other things can't. I think that there are ways also with good skilled there are mature hip hop artists around who can help you guide it as well. There are ones that understand this totally, are grown-up artists, and can really help kids to find their way through to the good stuff, to where they are letting their emotions rip and getting their anger out and telling the world what they think of it. To exciting music, and that's great. But it doesn't need care. You're absolutely right. There are things that can go terribly wrong as well.
Thank you, Nigel. I'd just like to bring in Temitope, so I can just see you on the screen. If you'd like to unmute, and then we'll finish with Judith. Temitope.
Hi, good evening. I'm a student at St. George's studying physiotherapy. So I'm just in the gap year. Yeah, and when I was in my gap year, I went to a mental health hospital because I was reading some books on like the brain changing itself and reacting to things around and constant practice. So at this mental health hospital that I was working, it was with dementia patients. Yes. So most of them were in their late stage of dementia, and music was used frequently as a sensory intervention for them. But because they were in the late stage, it was really difficult to find out like how they were reacting to it, and if it was in excess or something. Because I'm just imagining that with people, even people without any health condition or any specialized need for music, it can become an overload, like a sensory overload. And because these people were in the late stage dementia, they often presented with some symptoms that were like pretty much part of the normal presentation. So it was quite difficult to tell if they were enjoying the music or if they were aggravated by the music. Like it was just a very difficult thing to tell because they were in the late stage of their dementia. So I was wondering if there was a way of maybe detecting or knowing if people like that were reacting negatively to the music that was being played.
Well, there would in theory be. I mean, like, for example, the simple sensors we've been using. The problem is, with people in late stages of dementia don't like wearing things, so they'll probably, rip them off and stamp on them if you're not careful. But if there is a chance, we can with HRV and other measures, we can find out how pleasantly aroused they are or how pleasantly relaxed they are. We can do that. The other thing is, I think that we can trust a little bit. Two things I've mentioned. I think that they will give signs in other ways. So, for example, the remembering words effect in singing. If you get that, you're on a good track. And if you're not getting it, keep trying in some other ways. I think that there are, that's a good guide to what's working. But if people are getting to being able to join in with words and things that they may not otherwise be able to speak, you've got through to the right places, the right things are happening. And the other thing I think is one of the things we've been doing with X system is also entrainment things, which is in the sense of helping people make journeys. And so we're trying to take, if we have a group of people who are very agitated, we're going to try and take them to a relaxed place with music. And then we'll be able to see that if we've succeeded. So as we will the other way around, a sluggish group, getting them moving, we can observe those things in an entrainment process. It might not come with an individual piece of music, but if a set of pieces of music calculated and organized so as to take them from somewhere to somewhere else, we should be able to see the somewhere else. And if we're not seeing that, then music's not working for them. And we shouldn't have high expectations. Or as you say, if there's information overload, you have to be careful of that. The other thing that gets very difficult in homes in dementia, going together with the problems of old age, is hearing capacities. So there are so many different levels of audition, of listening, being able to hear. And what we really need is really ultra modern technology where we can get parametric speakers, pillow speakers, armchair speakers, where people can have music at the level of volume they need to be able to hear it comfortably. And it's so often in care homes, music is blasted because the people with least hearing can't hear it, and so it's blasting louder, which entirely brutalizes the people that have still got sensitive hearing. So we need, I believe, I would love to, I've been desperately trying to get money to do this. I would love to have a pilot care home where we had proper speakers. It doesn't cost much. We would have speakers that would allow individuals to enjoy music at the level of volume that suits them and their hearing. That would be really, really useful to do that. And Andrew and I tried, we just failed. We just, turned down again. We were going to do it in a care home in Gateshead, but we keep trying. And but that would be a very important experiment to do, is maximizing individual listening opportunities for people with dementia. Terribly important. That's individualized by parametric speakers. We can do it. We have the technology. There's no excuse, and it's not expensive. We can do this, and I'd love anybody who's up for it. Please, let's do that, because it's such an important thing.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the lovely question. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic question. Thank you. I think we had one last question, and I think we ought to close it. Judith.
Yes. So Judith, I don't know if you want to turn your microphone on, or I can speak it. I'll pose what you've. Oh, there you are. Hi.
I'm there. I'm here. Yeah. No. The question that I posed. I'm a GP in Scotland, and this strikes me as fitting very much into lifestyle medicine and social prescribing. And as we're coming through, hopefully towards the end of the trauma of the pandemic, it would be lovely to have this as another form of support and treatment for our communities. So I just wondered, is there any place where it would be accessible for me and on a clinical level to be able to use this and support my patients with it?
Can I jump in there? Absolutely. I'm in Scotland. Not at the moment, but I normally am in Scottish borders, Coburn's Path, and would love to be. We have these resources on the Recovery College online.
Yeah.
It's a UK-wide resource. We have that, and we would love to be in contact about how we might develop it. I've been talking to. I'm a great friend of Leslie Morrison, and people working on medical humanities who succeeded me in, at Edinburgh running it, and would be very much wishing to look ways to go forward. Unfortunately, with trauma-informed care, we were trying to go forward in Scotland, but because it's a national policy, we had more hoops to go through and couldn't get as far as we could with Tees and Weir. So that was one of those paradoxes of success. We're actually in a better position, but it's stymied us for getting those things moving. So please, we would love to be in touch about this and whatever we can do.
Superb. That'd be great. Yeah, because I'm not far away. I'm West Calder. So
there you are.
Not far.
Well, if there's some way we can get emails to one another, I think Deborah has I don't know. How did you get in touch with this program? Was it through Deborah or through?
Actually, through my husband who works in Wishaw, who gave the contact to me, and I signed up, so it was a little bit convoluted.
Oh, right.
Nigel or Angela, is there a link at all that you'd like to put in the chat that people could then see, whether it's to the Recovery College or to somewhere they could contact you through, that you'd be willing to share? And I also wondered, Angela, if you had any reflections on the last few questions have been directed rather towards Nigel, but do you have any final reflections on that before we finish?
No, not really. I think the social prescribing is a good model. It is a good fit. I guess it's just how the process by which the social prescribers have this as part of their repertoire. That's the issue. But yes, I'll post the links now to the playlists.
That would be fantastic. Oh, Nigel has very, very kindly put his email in the chat, which is super generous. So you're going to be flooded, Nigel. But, do take the opportunity to copy that. And then, Thomas, if you've got it also, if anyone writes to us or gets in touch with us, they'll be able to have access to it. I think now, because it's getting to, it's 7:05, and I know we've all had long days and supper is waiting. I just want to really, really thank our wonderful speakers, Dr. Angela Kennedy and Professor Nigel Osborne. That was the most fantastic and inspiring and stimulating course. Yeah, absolutely. If you want to unmute and clap, or even visually clap, that would be fantastic. Brilliant.
I'd add that we've had a real outpouring of thanks in the chat as well. There seems to be so many pleased people to see you today. So.
Well, that's fantastic to hear, because I was just going to say, before I thank the rest of you, actually, is that I walked behind a family the other day where the father was telling his son to give up music because he gave it up as a child and couldn't see the point of it. And I thought that what you have done is absolutely shown the point of it in every possible way. So it's very inspiring. I also did want to thank Tina Golden from Opera Circus, because she really helped to initiate and set up this collaboration, has worked very closely with Nigel. So thank you. And to thank Craig Alexander Rennie, and to Thomas Brown, who's done a massive amount of work, as you've probably seen, supporting this event, which would have been impossible without him. And Yolanta Jeremina and Baba Shiba, who has also given us lots of advice in the background. And to St George's and Jane Saffel and Jenny Hyam for supporting these sorts of events so we can continue to put them on. But lastly, and absolutely not least, I would like to say thank you to all of us for sharing your evening with us. I have seen so many of you who've been coming to other events, and it's really lovely to see you here. And the new faces are exciting, and I hope to see you next year. So I would say goodbye from Open Spaces, and have a really lovely evening and a lovely summer, and hope to see you next year.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Fantastic. I'll just turn off the recording.